Welcome to this tutorial on the Portal Records Mover in XrmToolBox. I'm Jonas Rapp, but I'm not an expert in this area, so I called my Canadian friend and fellow MVP Nick Doelman. Nick will show you all you need to know about how to move configuration for a portal from one CRM organization to another. So Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Nick Doelman. I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP.
Great to have you on the show, Nick, teaching us about the Portal Records Mover by Tanguy Tuzard.
So, I have my portal I've set up here. I've created some web pages. I've created a custom template. I've done a few modifications, nothing too major. But now I want to move all of this changes over from my sandbox system to my production system. So if I take a look at my sandbox system here under the portals section, I'll see that I have a bunch of things like a bunch of web pages, other things such as entity lists, entity forms, web forms, content snippets. The list goes on and on. There are dozens of entity records that hold portal specific data. So moving it from one system to another system can be a little bit clunky. Now I could always export it to Excel and import the data, but then things get a little bit out of whack. Thankfully, the XrmToolBox has a tool, the Portal Records Mover. First off, if you've done any kind of customizations to your system that rely on your portal, I'm going to need to move that over to my destination system as well. The other thing you need to be aware of, you're going to make sure you're going to need to configure your portal add-on on your destination system as well. That needs to be configured and set up with a particular portal already configured and ready to go. Even if it's the basic portal, it needs to be there. So I'm going to connect to my sandbox. I'm going to go here, and that's connecting to my source system. That's where I'm going to be pulling the data from. I'm going to launch the Portal Records Mover. So I'm going to load my items here. It's the very first thing I'm going to do. And what that's going to do, it's going to load all of those portal specific entities into the Portal Records Mover. So as you can see, there's a pretty long list, and it would take quite a while to import and export each of these individually. So I'm going to select all. Now I have noticed in my projects that there are a couple entities that cause a few problems. Particularly the forum notification I've noticed sometimes causes issues, the page notification, and also the invitation record. So I'm going to unselect those from moving the portal data. We don't need them anyway, but it's just good to unselect them. The other thing I'm going to unselect is the notes. If I unselect notes, but if I make sure that my web file entity here is selected, then the Portal Records Mover will move those attachments, no problem. So you will get your images and your CSS files and anything you've added as files into the web file. That will move when you unselect notes. You want to unselect notes because you don't want to get all the notes in your system moved over from your source to your production. Once I do that, I'm going to choose the website of which I'm pulling from. And I only want to get active records. So once I've got that, I'm going to click on the retrieve records. What that's going to do, it's going to cycle through all of those entities. It's going to pull that data out into a nice format. So as we can see, it's pulled all that data. I can take a few things. I have one ad placement. If I look at stuff like content snippets, you see I have a whole bunch of content snippets here. Now the other thing too is I can actually choose to only import certain records. And this is something the configuration migration tool cannot do, is I can go through and I can deselect a couple of these records or any records I don't want to move over. It's kind of a nice feature if there's particular things that are only specific to your sandbox portal, that's not to your production portal. But for now, I'm going to leave all that in here. Now that we have all the data, we have everything set up, then I'm going to export that. So it's pretty straightforward. It's going to export to an XML file. I'm going to save that. I'm going to overwrite the one I had before. And now that all that data has been exported. So now that I've moved all the data, I'm going to take a look at my destination system. But what we're going to do now is we're going to migrate that portal data from our destination system to over here. And I also have my solutions imported, so it's all good to go. I'm going to connect to my production system. I'm going to launch my Portal Records Mover again, and then this time I'm going to import records. So I'm going to choose my XML file that I just exported a few minutes ago. Now this is a message that's going to come up, and this is important. It's going to want to deactivate the plugin that creates web pages. Now the reason why we want to deactivate this in the portal, the multi-language capabilities of the most recent version of the portals will actually store each of the content in sort of child web page records of a main web page. So every time you go in and create a new web page, in the background a plugin creates a second web page. Now, since we're importing the portal data, we already have our multi-language pages already set up. So we're not going to want to recreate or double them up. So that's why it's important that we shut these plugins off. So we choose yes to this, and we wait for the data to go through and be retrieved. So you can see here it's deactivating the web page plugin steps, and it's processing all those records. So what we're seeing now here is going through and adding those references. So it's lining up all those lookups and those connections. So that's something that the importing things from Excel wouldn't do. So you'd have to do that manually. And it moves pretty quickly. And of course, at the very end, it's going to reactivate the steps, and I see that my import's been complete. If there were any error messages, it would give you the option to open up a log file so you could check what the errors are. Sometimes it might be missing entities or some different references. Usually the system's pretty good, and the logs are pretty descriptive as well when you do need them. So if I were to take a look at my system here, and I just do a refresh on the website records, I can actually see that my portal did move over. If I look at my custom things like my custom entity forms and things I've set up, these have all moved over into my destination system. So now that's all there is to it, to move that portal data using the XrmToolBox. Now the nice feature that this has, that the configuration data migration tool or some of the others don't, that if I were to make a change, so if I were to go into my sandbox system and I wanted to update some records or add a content snippet. So I'm just going to add a very quick content snippet here. When it comes up, I'm just going to call this test. If I were to go back into my XrmToolBox, connect to my sandbox, I'm going to select all for this particular case. And this is where I can begin to filter. So I've created a new record. So I want to get all the new records that are created before today. So I'm going to choose, we're in September 2018, and I'm going to choose everything that's been created since yesterday as a filter on here. So if I click on Retrieve Records, all that ever pulled up was one content snippet, the one I just created. So that's one of the nice features of the Portal Records Mover as well. You can actually do it just to move the delta, just the changes, so any new records modified on or after a certain date. So you don't have to refresh or revamp your destination portal all the time. Thanks to Jonas has given me this opportunity. He is my third favorite Swede.
Hey, wait, Nick, did you say third?
First ones being Daniel Alfredsson and Eric Carlson. But we hope you find this tutorial helpful, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks.
And thanks to you, Nick. That was a great tutorial. And for those of you watching, stay tuned for the next episode in the XrmToolBox School.